And at this stage, I would like to invite to the stage Ms. Khadija Patel. She is a journalist in residence at the International Fund for Public Interest Media. This is a major initiative to come with emerging challenges in terms of media viability, especially in the Global South. And Ms. Patel, over to you.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon, everybody. Oh, it's almost evening then. Throughout the day today, we've heard about the various challenges facing news media. And when they pack together like this, it is easy to become despondent. It is easy to lose hope. But the one thing that we cannot do is lose hope. What we must emerge from this day, from this week here in New York, is resolute, actually. And remember that the world is actually a lot different. It looks a lot different than it did 30 years ago. In South Africa, where I'm from, 30 years ago, the apartheid regime was fast crumbling. And in the months, maybe even up to, I think it was maybe the year before we actually had a democratic election, I remember being in my third grade classroom with my teacher who had a radio on all day. She was listening out for news about the result of a referendum that had been held to end apartheid. Even as an 8-year-old, and this is the part where you calculate my age frantically in your heads and congratulate me for not looking a day over 18. Even as an 8-year-old, without then properly understanding what apartheid was and how history was unfolding in that moment, I could feel that that radio was connecting us to something hugely significant. In the coming months, South Africa achieved something immense: freedom. And it was brought to us in moments like those: the crackle of voice on the radio, the dots on our screens, the ink on paper, the images and voices that take us to the streets to raise our voice, to chart new paths, and ultimately connect us to the rest of the world. What it actually does is connect us to the sum of our humanity in real time. It is because South Africa eventually enshrined the right of freedom of expression in its constitution that I've been able to fulfill this compulsion I feel towards journalism. And I'm not sure who exactly to blame for that. It's either that teacher with the radio on, or my grandfather who apparently read the newspaper to me as a baby, some lullaby that was. But I do love journalism. And being a journalist, filling out the blanks of our understanding of our world, is one of the best jobs in the world, I think. But it is increasingly becoming more difficult. I cannot tell you those difficulties in better language than what you've heard here on the stage today. Don't get me wrong, journalism was never an easy job and is never meant to be easy, I don't think. And the media is far from perfect. We've never had a perfect news media. We must always endeavor to be better, acknowledge our faults, acknowledge our shortcomings. But in the sum of the endeavor of independent news media, the world has been a more peaceful, more prosperous place. What we are now confronting is a world where media organizations are contracting, the number of journalists in active employment rapidly dwindling, and with them, the number of stories in the public interest. The result is that we understand less of the complexities of who we are. We are alienated from the big decisions made in our name, and we are ultimately deprived of our human rights. It's not just the blunt force of autocracy that imperils freedom of expression and freedom of the press as it once did. The threats are more complex, more sophisticated, and yet in some ways, very, very simple. Right now, most news organizations in low and middle income countries are simply not able to sustain themselves. Left alone to face market forces, most organizations will not survive. And that has created a new set of realities that at once feeds autocratic impulses and makes individual journalists and institutions more vulnerable to capture. Make no mistake, we will never be able to save every institution in peril. But if we take decisive action now, we may be able to ensure that there is a healthy ecosystem that supports the resilience of news media. The response that we must accumulate requires first a commitment to the value of news media, a renewal to the commitment of its protection, and an understanding that without it, we lose something of what it means to be human. I'm proud today to announce the launch of the International Fund for Public Interest Media, the first global multilateral partnership to ensure that news media does exist for the public interest. The International Fund has already raised close to $50 million, and I want to thank UN Secretary General Guterres and our hosts here, UNESCO, for their early and continued support for this endeavor. We must also appreciate the efforts of some of the early financial supporters of the fund. Ambassador Power, who spoke earlier, and her team under the leadership of President Biden, with their initial contribution, have seeded this initiative. Alongside them, President Macron of France has also been a crucial supporter of this initiative, providing financial support and hosting our headquarters in Paris. We're grateful, too, for supporters like the Swiss government and the Ford Foundation, who have been essential in ensuring that this idea becomes reality. Altogether, there is now a growing global coalition supporting the International Fund. In addition to more than 15 governments, philanthropies, and corporate entities who have made a financial contribution, several states have expressed their political support for the International Fund. In recent weeks, the presidents of Moldova and Timor-Leste have personally indicated their support and agreed to join the Council of the International Fund as representatives of the top-performing countries on the RSF Press Freedom Index in their regions. The challenge, ladies and gentlemen, is vast, but our ambition must be equal to it. We aim to raise at least $1 billion in financial support in the next 10 years. In this first phase of operations, the International Fund will make grants available for media organizations in 4 focus regions: Africa and the Middle East, the Asia-Pacific region, Latin America and the Caribbean, and Eastern Europe. Overseen by an independent board led by Maria Ressa and Mark Thompson, the fund will allocate resources to organizations to become more resilient, while supporting them to innovate towards new models of enterprise. We have already completed a small-scale pilot funding round that awarded 13 pilot grants to media organizations in Brazil, Colombia, Lebanon, Nepal, Niger, Sierra Leone, South Africa, Tunisia, and Ukraine. And we will continue to work in these countries and in at least 30 others over the next 2 years. This is only the beginning, but it is an important beginning for the International Fund and for the world, for the future of news media. We must ensure that the ability for news media to exist is protected and enhanced. And I want to use this opportunity to reiterate a call made by Secretary General Guterres for nation-states to urgently support the future of news media by raising their financial commitments to media. Currently, 0.3% cumulatively of ODA, of development assistance, is directed to news media. We want to join the call, supported by many, many others, to raise this figure to 1% over the next 10 years. This is not an insurmountable task. The challenge is vast, yes, but the resources are at our disposal to confront it. I want to ask as well that the journalists and activists assembled here join us in ensuring that we accelerate this movement, that we affirm our commitment to the value of news media. And for that, I invite you to sign a letter we have published on our website, ifpim.com/letter, calling for international support for the protection of news media. A world without an independent public interest media would be a rather lonely one. But we have the opportunity to confront that reality right now. Thank you.